The South African Human Rights Commission has escalated the battle with Julius Malema, confirming that it will now pursue sanctions against the economic freedom fighters leader following a hate speech ruling that has once again thrown him into the center of national controversy. The decision, which underscores the seriousness of the matter, has ignited passionate reactions across the country, with supporters crying foul over what they see as political persecution, while critics insist that no individual, no matter how powerful, should be allowed to undermine constitutional principles or fuel division with impunity. The Commission's move marks one of the most high-profile attempts in recent memory to hold a political leader accountable for rhetoric deemed harmful, and the ripple effects will undoubtedly shape South Africa's political and legal landscape in the months ahead. At the heart of the case lies Malema's fiery rhetoric, long a hallmark of his political style, which the Commission has now ruled went beyond freedom of expression and crossed into the territory of hate speech. For years, Malema has thrived on his ability to polarize, to say what others fear, and to package anger and dissatisfaction into language that electrifies his base. But critics have long warned that his words also carry the potential to inflame divisions and stir resentment across racial and political lines. The Commission's ruling echoes those warnings, making it clear that the right to free speech, while protected in South Africa, is not unlimited and must be balanced against the rights and dignity of others. Malema, however, has responded with characteristic defiance. For him, this battle is not merely legal but ideological. He has framed it as yet another attempt to silence a revolutionary voice that speaks uncomfortable truths, insisting that the Commission is being used as a tool to target him and his movement. The EFF has repeatedly argued that Malema's rhetoric, while provocative, is political speech meant to challenge entrenched inequalities and injustices, not to promote hatred or violence. By pushing back so fiercely, Malema has ensured that the case has transformed from a legal dispute into a political showdown, one that could either weaken him if sanctions are imposed or strengthen him if his supporters see him as a victim of selective justice. The stakes are high. Sanctions against Malema could range from fines to restrictions on his ability to hold public office, depending on how the courts and relevant authorities interpret the Commission's findings. Such consequences would not only have implications for Malema personally but also for the EFF as a whole, particularly as it positions itself within South Africa's volatile political climate. With the Government of National Unity still navigating its early days, and coalition politics reshaping the power balance in Parliament, the weakening of a figure like Malema could shift alliances and strategies across the spectrum. Yet, equally, any perception that Malema is being unfairly targeted could galvanize his base, strengthening the EFF's position among those disillusioned with the political establishment. The Commission's move is also a test for South Africa's constitutional democracy. Since 1994, the country has prided itself on protecting both free expression and human rights. But cases like this highlight the delicate balancing act between those values. For many citizens, the question is not whether Malema is a divisive figure, he clearly is, but whether sanctioning him for his speech strengthens or undermines democracy. Does it reinforce accountability, ensuring that leaders cannot say whatever they want without consequence? Or does it risk creating a precedent where political speech, however controversial, is policed in ways that could suppress legitimate dissent? These are the debates now gripping South Africans, stretching from parliament to social media to township discussions. Supporters of the Commission argue that accountability is essential, particularly for public figures whose words carry enormous influence. They point to South Africa's painful history, where rhetoric and propaganda often preceded violence, and insist that leaders must be held to a higher standard. Hate speech laws, they say, exist precisely to prevent dangerous words from translating into dangerous actions. For them, Malema's rhetoric cannot be brushed aside as harmless political theater, it must be addressed firmly to prevent lasting damage to social cohesion. On the other hand, Malema's defenders argue that South Africa's democracy is robust enough to withstand his words and that sanctioning him is unnecessary and counterproductive. They insist that his speech reflects legitimate frustrations about inequality, unemployment, and historical injustices, and that attempts to criminalize or sanction him are seen by many as attempts to silence the anger of marginalized communities. In this view, the Human Rights Commission risks being painted not as a guardian of rights, but as an enforcer of elite consensus, stifling voices that challenge the status quo. What makes this confrontation particularly explosive is the timing. South Africa's political arena is already deeply polarized, with economic stagnation, service delivery failures, and corruption scandals fueling public frustration. Malema's ability to channel that anger into sharp, emotive speeches has long made him both feared and admired. For the Commission to step in now, at a time when the EFF is both consolidating support and facing scrutiny, ensures that the ruling will be interpreted as more than legal. It is political theater with real consequences for the balance of power. International observers are also watching closely. South Africa's handling of hate speech and political accountability is being seen as a case study in how young democracies deal with the limits of free expression. In a world where populist leaders across continents have blurred the line between speech and incitement, South Africa's decision could set an example, either celebrated as a model for human rights enforcement or criticized as overreach that stifles political diversity. The outcome of this process could therefore shape not only domestic politics but also South Africa's image abroad as a democracy that continues to wrestle with the promises and contradictions of its constitution. For ordinary South Africans, however, the issue is not abstract. It touches on lived realities of tension, inequality, and the fear of words escalating into violence. For some, Malema's rhetoric is a necessary wake-up call to a political class that has failed to deliver meaningful change. For others, it is a dangerous drumbeat that risks unraveling fragile progress in reconciliation. The Human Rights Commission's pursuit of sanctions forces the nation to confront these competing truths and decide which values must take precedence in this moment. As Malema and the Commission prepare for the next phase of this battle, the country waits. Will sanctions weaken one of the most controversial figures in South African politics, or will they fuel his rise by painting him as a martyr for free expression? Will the ruling reinforce the idea that no leader is above accountability, or will it spark doubts about whether democratic institutions are being weaponized? These questions are now unavoidable, and the answers will shape not just Malema's future, but the future of political discourse in South Africa.